Tom and Daisy. I really appreciate the two of you sitting down to join me. You know, we tried to schedule this last week, and I had some things come up, so I appreciate the flexibility with that and being able to reschedule this. So how have you guys been doing recently?
Yeah, good. And I think basically we're rescheduling the whole of 2020, aren't we? So
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Just that feels that that's the 2020 vibe. Just reschedule everything and go with
Yeah.
the flow
Just
because you never know what's going to happen.
keep on moving days around until things fit. Because don't set your watch by 2020.
Well, and that's what's been nice. You know, everyone, including myself, has been flexible with everything, you know, whether we want to or not. So thanks again. I'm glad that it seems like you two have been able to at least stay busy during 2020. I know that at least as of right now, or as of today, the recording, you've got a feature film coming out tomorrow,
Right.
which got to be exciting.
It is. It is. So it's premiering at the drive-in in where is it?
North London.
North London somewhere. So it's the first cinema that we've been to in 7 or 8 months now. Because actually no, I think Joker was the last film that we saw in the cinema, so probably a little bit earlier than that. So it's the first time that we're going to see a film on the big screen in quite some time. Obviously it's exciting being able to watch a film that we've worked on the big screen as well. And it's just like almost any single afternoon where we get out of the flat is a good day.
And not to mention that it's a drive-in movie, and for UK people, that's not our thing. We don't get to do that. You know, we grew up on it in films and movies as kids, so it's very much like it's a really exciting retro experience for us. So yeah, our very first drive-in movie experience is a film that we wrote the music for.
I mean, that's really cool. And you know, you say it that that's an American thing, and maybe that's the silver lining of the coronavirus is for a very long time it like existed in the US only in movies. So, you know, they're finally popping back up because I don't think I've been to one, you know, since I was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 years old. I haven't gone to one recently, but it's at least on the list of possible things to do. So yeah, so that's really cool, and that's Clay's Redemption, right?
That's right, yeah.
And can you give a little synopsis on it? Because when I looked it up, the synopsis, at least on IMDb, was both very vague and elicited like a zillion questions. I think it was something along the lines of like Clay seeks redemption in this world of gods and immortals. And seeing stills and little clips and names of characters, it's, you know, like neon soaked, but there's like demons and gods and all this stuff. And seeing all that combined was just, I was wondering like, what the hell is this movie?
I think you just described our first bit of scoring experience, actually. We're like, what the hell is this movie? Especially as when we first got it, it didn't have any sound. So yeah, that was really interesting. Do you want to have a go at a synopsis?
No, it's
Okay.
so hard to. It's not hard. It's not hard to explain in the same way that Inception or Tenet is hard to explain. It's hard to explain because I mean it's a relatively very simple, straightforward story, but it's a high concept film. So the visualized nature of it, the sounds and the characters, a little bit more hyper realized than what you'd have in a usual film, I suppose. So yeah, let's have a just
Okay.
yeah, go on.
Okay.
Give it a go.
So Clay is the main character, and he is an enforcer for the gods, and he moves between different bodies. So that's why he's called a sleeve walker, because the bodies are sleeves, and he just moves between them so that he can do the jobs that he's set to do. And this is his final job, and he's got to protect this woman who he doesn't know why he has to protect her. He's just told, get this job done, and then you get your exit, which means he's then free. So this is his story of his one final job.
That was an elevator pitch. That was
all right, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've done that.
You're hired. You're gonna go.
Yeah, it sounds like you've given that. You've given that over and over. So that was pretty good.
I mean, I've watched it a lot.
So, having watched it a lot, like, how do you keep the excitement going to like actually seeing the real live premiere? I mean, are you imagining you're gonna sit in and be like, oh yeah, this happens, that happens. Oh, I know what he's gonna say, or does it still have kind of the same excitement as in anticipation?
I think, I mean, first of all, we haven't seen the full thing since 2019.
Oh.
So we finished our part in end of 2019, I think. So I think one thing I'm trying to get really good at is like putting projects aside once we've finished, and then you really do get the excitement of seeing it again. What's so easy to do is sit there and kind of pick apart little things, or like, oh, I'm not sure about that level. Well, did we really write that? I don't remember writing that. When obviously we did. But there's no joy in that. And at the heart of it, Tom and I are just massive, film nerds. We absolutely love film. We're storytellers who happen to speak the language of music. So we try to go into every screening, letting go of all our own, issues, and just watch it as movie lovers.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I think it's, I don't know how people are able to go into cinemas and be able to pick apart everything that they do. And something that scares me is that Adam Driver aspect of hating everything that you do, but you don't want to see yourself in it. That for us is not why we would want to get into film. We absolutely want to make sure that we enjoy the end result as much as we enjoyed working through it in the first place. And at the end of the day, Daisy and I, we are marrying the two things that we love the most, which is music and film. So if we can't find the enjoyment factor in that job, then we're probably not doing the right thing. Not to compare it to Adam Driver, by the way, because I'm pretty sure that there's other aspects that I didn't really give him much respect for in that little comparison.
No, we knew what you meant. He's got his thing.
No, I mean, and it makes sense. When I was younger, I wrote a couple scripts, and one of them was like made into a small film, and I think that was a very hard part for me, was to just sit back and enjoy it as an audience member rather than as someone who worked on it. And I don't know, I think maybe a little related. I think there's also so many people online, like it's a part of kind of online like film criticism of just picking things apart and finding issues. And I mean, you said it, there's no enjoyment in that. So whether it's something you worked on or not, I don't, at this point, having seen enough films, I don't know why bother if that's what you're going to do anyways.
Absolutely.
It's a collaborative aspect, this thing that we do. So when we're going in, when we're hearing any of the cues that we've written further down the line, it's going to conjure up those times in which we've been going back and forth with the directors and taking notes, and then striving to achieve the same goal, which is to make sure that the music is working with the narrative. So effectively, it should still also be able to remind us of the times when we're actually working together as teams. And it's something that Daisy and I really enjoy the most, is having that team building aspect of it, and then talking it through. I mean, we're looking forward to this premiere tomorrow, because we're going to be seeing the director and producers and the actors all together, socially distancing, but all together in this one place. So we're going to be able to talk this through, and just kind of geek out about all of the different behind the scenes BTS aspects of it. And it's kind of exciting. I've got a kitten that is staring at me down here. That's why I keep on looking down there. So yes, I'm talking about you.
The power of the gaze. It's funny that you mentioned like the picking apart of the film criticism. I think particularly for us with this film, it's such a bombastic, insane film and score that the thing we've said most to each other is, look, it's not for everyone. There'll be people that absolutely hate it. There'll be people that absolutely love it. We weren't trying to be clever or subtle because that wasn't our job in this film. So I think by this point, we've really let that go and just gone, it's cool, it's not for everyone. We're really proud of it. The director loves it, the producer loves it. They're our bosses, you know, that's what's most important. And we'll just go along and enjoy ourselves.
I mean, it makes sense, and I think that's such a good, healthy perspective because, you know, I've seen so many films that either I've disliked or that I've liked and so many other people don't, and it's for that exact reason that it's maybe not for a particular type of person, but a particular type of person's gonna enjoy it more. And you know, if you don't fit into that kind of set of criteria or likes, you know, you won't. But I think having that in your head beforehand is, I don't know, it's just such a good approach because I could imagine if you think that everything you make, everyone's gonna like it, and if they don't, there's either something wrong with them or something wrong with you. Is no matter how good you are, just setting yourself up for disappointment.
Sounds exhausting. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it would be so nice though if everything you made and everything I made and everyone else made was beloved by everyone. But you know, I think that.
So happens with Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not too keen on homogeny. I really, really do find some kind of excitement in being able to praise for risk takers and being able to actually, you know, even if I don't like what they've done, if I can still appreciate the risk aspect of what they've tried to achieve, then I will applaud that in itself. But yeah, they're both risk takers and I love it, and yeah, happy days.
Are there any like risk takers that come to mind for you when you say that?
Oh. What composers?
Yeah, do you mean composers?
I mean, it could be, you know, composers, directors.
I mean, Hilda's
anyone.
One that comes to mind, isn't she? I think, you know, just with her Chernobyl score, you know, going into what they called, and making your own sound designs from the set location. That's really cool. I really like Marco Beltrami's, you know, kind of like the way his music kind of comes across as quite visceral, and it's like his hybrid scores are not like other people's hybrid scores. You know, they're very kind of like they grate against you, and I quite like that abrasive nature of them. I just always love
the what's the Star Wars thing on Disney Plus? I've totally blanked.
Oh,
The Mandalorian. It's got a bass recorder in it. I mean, if that's not a risk, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that, and then you know, Ludwig Göransson's most recent score for Tenet has been, as I've seen, has gotten like such a divisive reaction, and I think it's exactly, you know, maybe not for the bass recorder reason, but you know, because it is quite risky and different, and I haven't seen the film, but just listening to it isn't exactly what you expect in an action heist movie. I know that's kind of a gross oversimplification of the film, but still.
It's the clearest description I've heard of the film.
I think composing a score for a Christopher Nolan film has got to be a poison chalice, because I can imagine as he's such an artist, he's always going to have such a pitching as to the music in those kind of films. And again, Ludwig's going to be that person like us who's like, it doesn't matter whether or not half the audience hates it or not. I've got one person to please, and that's the director. That's all I care about. It's making sure that the director's happy and it works with the narrative. If the people don't like it, it's not my problem. You know, that's admirable for me.
I mean, that it's funny because I never look at it that way, just because I'm coming at it from a very different angle, and often just from really from the audience perspective. But that does make so much sense. I mean, and at the end of the day, it is nice for the composers to have people buying their album releases, their score releases, or getting 10 million streams or something. But to me, that always seems ancillary to actually doing a good job in the film first. It almost doesn't matter if your music's really popular from the film if it doesn't work in the film, or if the director hated working with you or hated what you did, because you're composing for the film first.
Absolutely. I think I really love Daniel Pemberton, because I feel like in the same way with Göransson, his scores are really different. He never has one sound. And he's really great on Twitter because he shares a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, and the way that he creates sound. I don't think he's really creating scores that anybody else is doing. They're not necessarily weird and crazy, no, not all of them, but they're not the same as everything else. And I just really love that. I love like we said, the risk takers, composers that really serve the story rather than serving a genre of music.
I think you'd be up for having a pint with Daniel as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, he seems cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think, definitely have a be up for a drink with him as well. He's definitely part of that list of people that we can admire for being able to take risks. He's also kind of one of those composers that when musicians and writers first come into this industry and they start wanting to work on film, they're often told, you have to make sure that you know what you're good at. Stick to your genre. Stick to the thing that makes it you. And when you listen to Daniel Pemberton's repertoire, and you think, well, what's him? Because he's good at it all, isn't he? It's like, what? It's just all of it,
Yeah, really different. Yeah.
Eclectic.
And that's not just because we're hanging our hat and crossing our fingers, because our reels are a little bit all over the shop. So yeah, we do look to people, especially when we get told that. We're like, yeah, but Pemberton. So
I mean, and that's, I don't know, I think he's such a good example for being really good at seemingly any genre. 'Cause, like, the fact that he's done some major superhero films, but then also you listen to his score for Motherless Brooklyn, which is like a kind of modernized version of this like jazzy noir detective genre, and it's like you shouldn't be able to do both of those really well. They're just so different, but he does it. And I think like it's so fun listening through some of a composer's works and seeing that ability. I watched this short film that came out recently, which is it's really just like a 7-minute Apple ad, but it's I think it's called The Stuntman, and it's all shot vertically, directed by Damien Chazelle, and Lauren Balfe is the composer. And the film basically, it's like every 45 seconds it jumps from genre to genre. So it starts off as this like modern thriller, and then it's there's a Wild West shootout, and then there's like a 60s French New Wave crime aspect, and like listening to Lauren like just jumping across these like super varied genres, and it's so seamless, and you're like that's the mark of someone who really knows what they're doing, because it's not like a feature film where he spent months and months doing it. It's like it's a 7-minute short film that who knows, he put together in a couple weeks probably. Like it's just so cool to hear that. And so hearing other composers do that too across features it's awesome.
You recommend that short film, do you?
I have mixed feelings on the film itself, and it's actually one that I have written something up about in one of my like short film music articles, and I haven't gotten around to releasing it. So we're doing a Christopher Nolan time thing right now, where as of recording, it's not out, and you guys wouldn't have been able to see it. But by the time this is released, that will have already been out. But you know, it's like, one of my views with short film is like, unless it's just awful and there's nothing redeeming at all, it's like when something's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, like if there are worthwhile aspects to it, everyone can find 5 minutes to watch something. You know, if you're on the train or waiting in line, like you can find the time. So it's not the best short that I've seen. But like there are definitely interesting aspects, and it being shot vertically like does lend itself to some interesting shots that you're literally never going to see right now.
Had I actually forwarded you over any of our shorts?
Yeah, I think before this you had sent me Satori, and then, gosh, this is maybe 2 or 3 months ago at this point.
Okay, yeah.
You'd sent me a few of them, and I'd watched Home by 8:30, and annoyingly, that's actually one that I've written something up about as well. That's in that article that I haven't published yet. So, you know, it's something that had I timed things correctly, would have been up. You could have seen it. You know, it would have
Who's judging?
Greased the interview a little bit more, but.
That suggests it's a good review. Interesting.
Well, he's telling us about it, but he's not telling us what's written in it. So
Well, one of the things for me, I don't know. I generally try to avoid giving bad reviews, like not to like sugarcoat everything I hear, but it's like if I hear a score that I don't like or that I don't find at least some interesting things to talk about, it's like I'm just not going to write it because like it's not like I'm a weekly critic who's getting paid by a publication. It's like it's something that I'm doing because I'm interested and because I don't think there are enough people writing it about this sphere. So it's like I'm not gonna waste my time just being negative. There's too much negativity. We're in a pandemic. I'll save it for later.
I like your attitude.
Could not agree more. Yeah.
So one of the things that I was wondering about, and I'd actually like to talk about the film, about Clay's Redemption a little bit more and the score. But before that, I was wondering what's your general collaborative approach? Because obviously most composers are just individual people, and you have some composer duos, but it's still relatively rare. So I mean, how do the two of you approach a film?
How do we approach a film? It's never one thing. How did we approach Clay's Redemption? God, it's so long ago. Sorry, Nick.
I think there's two aspects to it. There's the way that we collectively work, which may be, the questions of do you work from the script or do you write themes, all of that. In terms of working as a duo specifically, it's really shifted over the years. I think when we first started together, we had very different skill sets, and so it worked really well. We always used to describe it as like Tom would sketch and then I would colour in and then we'd add more colours. But as we've worked together, we've really, I think we've absorbed each other's skill sets.
There's a lot of crossover, isn't there? It's a Venn diagram, but somewhere in the middle of that Venn diagram is the film score's result.
Yeah. So it all does depend very much on our kind of personal relationship with the film. So whichever one of us feels they have the real connection, we'll probably start. We'll probably chuck some ideas down. I think the massive bonus of working with a composer partner, and why I have no idea why no one else, well, very few other people do it, is that when you hit that writer's block, you can step up, go make a cup of tea, and the other person can sit down and carry on. how is that not the best thing in the world?
I mean, from a filmmaker's perspective, knowing that there are two people that are going to be thinking about what kind of sounds could be brought to the table for that story at any one time is so much more of a benefit. I mean, I tend to think about this kind of stuff before we started even writing any of the ideas or sketching stuff out. I start thinking about sound palettes in my head as I'm brushing my teeth before I get into bed, and when I do, I'm talking to Daisy about it. Not everyone has that kind of, has that collaborative approach to being able to do those kind of things. The same with Daisy. She'll suddenly just randomly in the middle of the day start talking to me about what might work and what wouldn't work. And at that point, the brain's already started sketching before we've started sitting down at the keyboard and we've started writing or at the piano or the guitar, whatever it is. We're already starting to think about kind of what's going to work. And the tricky nature of this, the answer to this film, is that they kind of reverse engineered the film. So we didn't have a script to read. They weren't really able to send us rushes or anything like that. They were only able to kind of like send, what did they send us across? Like a pitch deck or something like that, wasn't it? Where they were able to kind of like tell us about the feel and the approach, and they'd tell us about they'd write basic descriptions of the characters. So we'd write sketches and ideas depending on what they'd send across to us, but it was really when we started working to image on the screens and figuring out what's going to work best in different situations. The film music really started coming to life for us. But it's quite tricky because in other films we've had a script, we've had fully fleshed out characters that we could start reading about. We're already reading about the subtext within those scenes. So we're already a step ahead in those other films. With this one, it was a jigsaw that was being pieced together as we're piecing the music together.
No, that's a really good show. Well, that's exactly what it felt like. And I think because the director of this was so he's a big fan of themes and strong ideas. We started by writing themes, but it was very much like Tom would be like, I've got this really strong idea for this character. Do you mind if I just start? Whereas I might feel for another character, so I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. But with everything, we're sharing the composing, we're creating the sound palettes, we're sharing the mixing. It's very much, with the exception of sort of saxophone and guitar, which I play saxophone, Tom plays guitar, and Tom does all of the drum programming. He's absolutely amazing. Pretty much everything else is whoever feels it, depending on the project.
I mean, basically how you split down the middle, our collaborative approach is one person is calling bullshit and the other person's defending their bullshit. And those roles will switch from time to time, depending on who it is. It's mainly for calling the bullshit, but they will switch, and that's kind of that's one barrier that we have to overcome before any sketches or cues or reels are sent across to the director to then start picking that apart. So we're already picking ourselves apart before it's gone anywhere else. Fine filtering process, like a nice vodka.
I mean, I'll say, because you're self-filtering, it sounds like it would be way more time-consuming than if it was just one of you doing everything and sending it off. But I imagine that whatever you're sending off is then, like you said, much more refined.
And also, if you're avoiding that sitting alone with a cue for 3 hours because you can't quite get it right. The beginning of the 3 hours, you just gone, can you just sit down and fix this? Because I don't know. And they're like, yeah, okay, fix. And then you send it off. It's so much less time in your own head. And it's something we've really learned over the last 5 years of working together, is not to be in our own heads and just sort of go, I don't know what to do with this, or I think this is good. Can you confirm that for me, please? You know, it's just a big time saver. And I think as two people that, you know, we're not in front of the camera people, we're very much, we like to kind of move away and create and work as a team. It's just a really good process for us.
Yeah.
Because you can't do this without trust, and we 100% trust each other. And if the other person says no, then you know they've got a really damn good reason, and you might fight for it, but at some point you're like, okay, well, if you don't think it's not going to work, pretty much that director's not going to think it's going to work. So leave it, move on, done.
I think that's a really good point. And you know, I was formulating another question, and then you kind of preempted it. So does that kind of trust that the two of you have built up, really kind of stop any sort of more heated moments where one of you is married to this idea and the other person is saying, like, no, that doesn't work, or no, it doesn't work in this form?
I think we definitely have heated moments because we really care passionately about what we're doing, and I wouldn't want to work with somebody that was a bit about everything. So that's cool. What we did do about 3 or 4 years ago is we implemented our system that we share with anybody that's working in partnerships, which is that, and it sounds very officey, but it's basically someone calls project manager. So if you're, for example, if I have the relationship with the director and I've had like the big conversations, I'll be like, I feel like I've got a really good idea of what this is. I'm calling project manager, and pretty much the only reason, other than to be the main line of communication, the only reason is that you have veto power. So there is always a point in a project where if you're just at loggerheads and you just disagree, you can call veto, and that's it. There's no big fight. There's no, resentment or anything like that. Because you're like, well, there's a reason why you're project manager on this. You feel you get it, veto done. And again, then you move on.
It's like a political veto in the fact that it's not something that we like to use liberally. It's kind of like a reluctance in that we'll spend a good couple of hours shouting and screaming at each other, throwing plates across the room, and then someone will go, do you know what? I'm the project manager. It's just the way it goes, and that's how.
Just the ultimate trump card, yeah.
Probably don't leave that image.
It's horrible.
But yeah, it makes so much sense, because the fact is that we're only ever going to work on projects that we totally believe in, which means that we're totally invested in everything that we do, and that includes every single note that we play and every single note that we write and the expression that's used. And that we try to reduce the amount of whimsical nature about that, to the point where where that second person can come in and say, why have you done that? What is the reason why? And if there is no why that you can back it up with, then it's probably a little bit weak, and you need to find a way in which you can rationalize it in some way. And that's why I still don't understand why there's not more composers working in partnerships like Daisy and I are, because we often go to these rooms full of other composers where they'll talk about the intrinsic nature of writing for them is very personal. It's like,
and often painful. That's how they describe it. Yeah.
But you're not working for you as well. You're working for a director. You're working for a filmmaker, producer, a writer, whoever it is that you're going to be sending your cues off to. That's who you're working with. So this is just a little bit more of a, I don't know, refined approach.
Interesting. I mean, it's got to be working, because I don't know how accurate the number is, but at least on IMDb you have 31 titles, I think, that you've worked on together, which is a lot.
That's a lot of hours in the same room. And we're alive. Love each other.
Exactly. You haven't killed each other. The scores keep coming out, so there's got to be something in there.
That's true.
I feel like it gets better. I feel like the more, I mean, as with any relationship, whether it's your best mate or your writer, director, producer. It does. Communication is everything. And the more that, like Tom was saying, that the better we can communicate with each other, the better we can communicate with our director or our producer, whoever we're working with, or the editor. So there's really no downside with that. And yeah, I think more people should do it. I'm a huge advocate. I think the fact that you can release your ego earlier is healthier for the project, and it's healthier for you because you're not getting stuck inside your own head or worrying about it. And you're not, as so many composers say to us, I don't know if I could just let someone else, work with me. I'm too much of a control freak. I'm a massive control freak.
She is.
Don't roll your eyes. But not in this, because again, like Tom said, it's not about us. It's not for us. It's for the story. It's for the narrative. And if we're doing it for us, we're not doing our job.
And it's interesting you point that the control freak aspect of it out too, because at the end of the day, you're making a score for a film, and not to disparage directors, but their whole role in some way is to be a control freak. They're effectively in charge of everything. So if they're able to delegate, the score, or one of 100 other things, there's always a sense of release and trust. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that seems like a healthy approach. But also, if you're a control freak as a composer, at the end of the day, the director's going to be sending you notes, and it's not like when you're in your composing duo where you have more of a back and forth. It's well, it's the director's film. You can fight with them, but at the end of the day, it's their film. So you're kind of forced to relinquish control to an extent, anyways.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I much respect to the directors for being able to do what he or she can do. I mean, it's those people that we serve. It doesn't necessarily mean that we just kind of say yes sir, madam, but we'll do whatever you say. It's just one of those kind of things where we've already practiced the dialogue between each other. We'll continue that dialogue with the director as well. And I think the only time relationships between composers and filmmakers break down is when that lack of communication is there. So that's one of the things that we harvest the most out of any of our collaborations with the films that we've worked on, is to make sure that the people that we're working with are fundamentally their friends, their mates. Hans Zimmer likes to call them part of the band. They're the people that we want to kind of go back and forth with, and so that's kind of why we want to make sure that when we're striving to achieve that same goal together, we're doing it in the best way we possibly can do.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and it seems like, I don't want to keep saying the same thing, but it seems like it's obviously working, because you're doing so many projects, and they seem to be turning out really well. Obviously I haven't seen all the films you've worked on or heard every score that you've done, but the shorts that I've seen all worked, and if everything's happy on Clay's Redemption, that's what more can you ask for? So I mean, that's cool, and hopefully some people seeing this or listening to this consider the idea of composer duos, because it's we've said it before, there's a surprising lack of non-individual film composers out there, and I think especially when you compare it to bands over the last 70 years, those tend to be very collaborative processes. I don't know. Maybe people see, Wagner or all sorts of other classical composers coming before that, and see kind of some of the early foundational film composers and how they're all working, at least as far as credits given, all working individually, and kind of like, maybe that's just a pattern and a trend that is kind of self-perpetuating. I don't know.
You know, it's really funny that you say that, because that was exactly what put me off being a composer when I was like 16. I think when I was a teenager, I was like a younger teenager. I was like, I want to be John Williams. I'm going to be a film composer. And then it's almost like the more that I learned, the more that I saw the same, like you said, Wagner, Beethoven, Mozart, the more that I saw the same composers, I built this image in my head of what it was. You know, sitting at a piano, blank sheet of paper, pencil. And I was like, that's not me. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And it wasn't until I clocked on to the collaborative nature of it, and the fact that you work as a team, even if you're not in a composer duo, you work with the director and the editor and the writer and the sets and costumes. You know, it's part of a whole thing. And for me, that's the foundation of joy in doing that. And I feel something I'm really passionate about is showing that process. I know Tom is as well, showing that process, being really open about it, so that more people feel that it's an accessible career choice for them.
Yeah, there does seem to be a lack of footage of behind the scenes stuff for composers, whereby you get to see behind the scenes, get to actually see additional composers working on things, working in tandem with each other to try and contribute to something, and then how the orchestrators and the arrangers come in, and then what it's like going into a studio. I managed to, again, like our first year of working together, I managed to find about 2 full-on YouTube videos of a recording session, and it took me ages to find them as well. And all I want to see are what kind of notes they're taking, who's taking the notes, what kind of notes are being given to them, like what kind of things is the conductor saying to the composers, who's on the microphone from the control desk, who's going to be asking all sorts of questions, like all of that kind of stuff. I want to see that nitty gritty kind of stuff.
There's very little of that still. I think it's becoming more popular, and younger composers are being encouraged to create behind the scenes footage as they're scoring, in case it helps with the PR later on. And it's something we do on every film anyway, just naturally. But there's still a habit of only filming the recording room, the orchestra, the conductor. That's not the only interesting bit. For me, that's not even the most interesting bit. And maybe that's because I'm a musician, I've seen it, I've done it. Like Tom said, I want to know what's happening in the booth. Who are all these people? Like when I started, I had no idea. Like we had absolutely no idea. There's 7 people in the recording booth. I'm like, but there's one composer and there's one person recording. So who are the other 5? And it's fascinating to sit and watch that. And I would definitely encourage more composers to show a more all-round view of the process. And also directors love it. They absolutely love it. They love having the footage and they love being there and the whole experience of it. So I don't know why we don't show more of it.
Every time we've gone into the recording studio, we've always brought the directors with us. It's it's fun. It's really good fun. But it's important to realize that there is a warts and all aspect of this that you shouldn't try and gloss over to then just, here we go, here's my magic piece of product that you don't know how it's made. No, I want to know how it's made. I'm more interested in how it's made now. That's the kind of thing that you want to actually see nowadays. I think it's quite crucial.
Well, I think even from a film music fan perspective, because it is definitely I don't think it's fair calling it a genre, because it's a style of music that encompasses so many genres. But there are so many people who truly just enjoy the music of films as well, just listening to it on their own. And so I think there's an audience out there of people interested in how it's going and how it's made. I mean, Daisy, you mentioned that there is footage of the actual orchestra doing things, and there's you see all sorts of photos of John Williams composing, and I mean, okay, those are cool, but then it feels like from the outside that there's this black box where everything else is contained, and you know, you have no, you know, from a audience perspective, you have no idea what's going on and the whole process behind it all.
It's kind of what perpetuates this myth of genius is the not knowing. So therefore, I'll assign the word genius to this person. And it's like, oh, there's a little bit more to it than just, you know, calling someone a genius willy-nilly. The fact is that they surround themselves with a team, but it's a collaborative process. There's so many people who are giving notes to and fro in this situation that you can't just like, oh, the way that one person managed to control a whole 120 people in a studio, they must be a genius. It's like, let's calm down a little bit. Let's be a little bit more realistic about things.
I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, and it does go towards so many other mediums as well. I mean, even, you know, you take like, you know, authors writing novels. Like, yeah, it is largely a creative output from one person, but you know, there are so many people who are also involved. You have, I mean, you know, you have like an editor, hopefully, that you work with, you're comfortable with, and that's, you know, really pushing back or helping shape things too. And that alone, I think, is just an aspect of the creative process that really gets overlooked. And I think there's always there's a very common narrative online, at least, that, you know, studio or editor, all this external involvement is just hampering whatever is actually being made. And yeah, sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But, you know, that kind of blanket statement, I think, Tom, it perpetuates what you said of this like genius mentality that, you know, the creator's the genius and everyone else is trying to stop them.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to turn the screensaver off on the computer behind us because it looks like we've got electricity going between our heads. So really,
driving you crazy.
It's really off-putting.
See, I thought it made you look like you know, a mad scientist or something. I thought that's what you were going for.
We're working inside symbiotic nature. This is the energy between me and Daisy that you don't normally see.
So that's what we'd see on the behind the scenes footage, just energy between the two of your heads. That's how your collaboration works.
Definitely.
So I guess now, kind of like changing gears a little bit, moving to your work on Clay's Redemption. You know, unfortunately, I haven't seen the film, so I don't know how the kind of the music all ties in. You know, I've listened to the score a couple times, and so you can kind of clearly hear a few themes and kind of hear a broader sense of a narrative going through. But you know, it's not like film music doesn't track that way. So you know, you don't know everything that's going on. But it is an interesting score because, you know, listening to it and kind of seeing some of the things that you've been posting, that it, you know, has this kind of synthy electronic palette that's used, but in a darker and, yeah, I'd say at times like quite chaotic way. And, you know, like you two made it. Feel free to disagree with what I said because, you know, it's yours and not mine. But I mean, what was the specific approach? How did you come to land on of that palette and style for the movie?
I mean, firstly, who are we to tell you what you hear? I think that's kind of it's interesting to actually get that feedback. I think we were going for something that's not just straightforward synthesizer-based film score. We're looking to try and put as many rough edges and grain into it as possible. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Do you want us to talk about the saxophone as well, because we, you know, it is kind of interesting that because that's what started it before we started working on the synthesizers.
That's really true, actually. So the very first thing that we did was I can't remember why either. We just collectively we were just like, this is what we want to do. We knew that we didn't want to we didn't want to just use like in the box existing sounds for everything. We didn't want it to be shiny, and even though it's a very neon kind of film, it's not like shiny neon expensive like Tron or something. It's got grain, it's got grit, it's the underworld.
It doesn't sound like a score that is written on a grid, does it?
No, it is chaotic is a really good word. I like that. But the first thing that we did was record a whole library of like what we call Saxophone Madness. So I had my tenor saxophone, and recorded a couple of nice melodies that might be themes, didn't really know, and then just loads of weird sounds, like everything that I was never taught to play on the saxophone when I was a kid, like clicks and overtones and harsh, horrible noises. And then from that, we then manipulated that and created new sounds out of that. So that was our starting point was very chaotic.
We spent a whole day recording banks of sounds on the instruments that you would not normally do on the instruments. Like, and also for me as well, once I managed to get Daisy into this zone where she was making clicking and popping sounds that she would not normally make or like to make in any other recording, I was like, great, let's start. Before I know it, she's behind the felt on the piano and like making all sorts of different sounds there as well. It's all this experiment.
Lots of pulses on the strings and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
It's great.
So we were very much, we'd made the choice to kind of really build from the ground up and start from an organic place rather than from a synth place, even though we knew it was going to meet somewhere in the middle in the end.
We also used baritone guitar on the track as well, on tracking, because we just before we started working on film, we had just come back from Bristol, where our sound designer and audio engineer Dom Lancaster is based. He's the other partner in 222, and I saw this baritone guitar in his studio, and I was like, can I use that for Place Redemption? And it's like, yeah, of course. Just give me back whenever. And before I knew it, I was like recording all of this. I mean, recording all of this new stuff. I mean, it's the same fingering style as playing an ordinary guitar. But when you're playing something and you're hearing a different sound come back at you, it makes you play differently to what you're normally used to. So as we're playing all of these things in, I was trying to get quite an overdriven heavy metal, not heavy metal, heavy metal sound, metallic sound. We're just sticking all of those into these banks alongside the saxophones and the pianos and whatnot. So it's all of these percussive elements, and making sure that we can get those ready for when we're actually going to start writing some cues for the film. Like they said, the next step was to start stretching them out of place and adding all sorts of different processing onto them to make them not sound like what they sounded like.
I think the first sort of theme or idea that we actually wrote, funnily enough, wasn't for a character. It was to kind of represent the city that they live in, because it's all shot in sort of like dark alleyways with bright lights, sort of the top just out of shot or just at the top of the screen. It's very urban. Lots of sort of it feels very grounded in a sort of smoky city way. So that was I think that was the first cue that we wrote.
Yeah, it was.
Kind of allowed us to bring it together.
I have to say, Nick, it was really hard. We're listening to a lot of Bernard Allen. We wanted to go old-fashioned film noir. It's like, we do this. It's a completely different world. We can't do that kind of film noir. We have to do this kind of thing instead. But there was that temptation there because, like Dave said, there's a lot of smoky alleyways and upshot of hero upshots with Canary Wharf in the background, or it's got some really cool visuals in the film. So, you know, the temptation for composers is to do what might have already been done. I'm going to backtrack a little from what I've just said, because it's a little bit cheeky, but I think there is also that element of wanting to do something that other composers of this kind of electronic, alongside saxophone genre, have done as well. We want to make sure that we're going to distance ourselves from any kind of comparison with Vangelis or anything like that. Is to make sure that we're doing something that has its own language, but served
which is the language of the film.
Yeah.
Because the film is not Blade Runner. So although the headline, you know, if you give it a little elevator pitch for both stylistically, you'll be like, oh, that sounds really the same. They're just not. So it would have been so weird and wrong and incongruous, wouldn't it? Yeah. It had to be its own thing. But it's funny that you said the noir thing, because I think that's where there's this little angular. When we were doing the melody part of the Saxophone Madness, we really wanted it to have kind of this have the tenor saxophone, because it's very close to a human voice. Saxophone sound is very close to human voice, but it also harks back to old school noir. But nothing in this world is pretty. Nothing is nice. Nothing is sweet. So everything that we tried to write, if it was, with the exception of one theme, I would say, was angular in some way. So not so that it's completely out of the box, not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it has something that's slightly off about it. So when we were writing this city theme, amid all this sort of grainy atmosphere stuff, it has this little motif on the saxophone, which is just it's just slightly off, like emotionally off. Hopefully, that was a plan anyway.
I think that's interesting. You know, with some of the, I don't even know if I want to go as far as to say like some of the genesis in film noir, but to take like a discrete ingredient that you hear so often in that music of just the saxophone, not even the kind of more traditional playing of it. Like you're just taking the instrument itself, and so you have that little bit of identity, and then just doing, you know, completely different things with it. You know, things that you would never have heard in, you know, those movies 70 years ago. So it's really cool to hear that, and having not seen it yet, obviously, like I would have had, you know, no idea. So yeah, it's a cool, like quite subtle homage to all of that. So that's, you know, that's very cool to hear. And I think one of the other aspects that, you know, you two mentioned earlier on, and that was that it, you know, has the film itself has, you know, some like the neon going on. And I think for most people, when you hear neon, you're thinking of, you know, like you mentioned, Tron, or some of the like the synthwave, new retrowave stuff that's really come out in the last like 10 years. And the only other movie that I can think of that is similar to what you two are talking about is Only God Forgives, and Cliff Martinez's score, where that's, you know, it is, there is like a lot of neon visual, but it's also so dark and dirty and gritty, and that's also a film where like nothing positive happens at all. And it's
this is a follow-up to Drive, is that right?
Yeah.
Do you remember watching that?
Drive, or Only God Forgives?
Only God Forgives. Yeah. It was like on a third date.
Was it?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, we didn't live together at the time, and he came over and we watched it. We didn't like it.
I love Cliff Martinez.
Yeah, no, Cliff Martinez is brilliant. I just don't think we could really follow the film that well.
But yeah, from what you're saying, that's that was definitely very similar to our intention with this score.
Yeah, what you see in frame, yeah, that really does play a part in what you're going to be then hearing. You know, so it's one of our fundamental things that we enjoy the most is being able to see what's going to be coming up on the screen, so then we can react to that. It's a reactionary process.
It's funny you mentioned like the retro synthwave. One of our characters, Una, who is, I think she's like a joyfully insane villain. She's kind of cute and sweet, but she's completely crazy. Yeah.
She was the starting process for us with all the crazy phonetic acts.
Yes.
It was her and her character that we saw this crazy aspect. And we was like, that's our starting point for the film. We'll start with all of the sax craziness.
Yeah, she's like an assassin who kills you with a smile. That's kind of her character. And she's very towards kind of the anime side of it, I would say, of sci-fi and fantasy in general. Like the way that her costume was put together and the way that she portrays it. And although we knew we didn't want to try and do the Stranger Things or the Tron, we did again want to bring in something of that. So we have this kind of synthwave type sound that basically never stays nice for very long. It's very tonal for a few seconds, but then whenever it comes on, you get these underlayers that bring the chaos that is inside her mind. So again, there's another, like, we just wanted to hark to it a little bit, hark to the tradition, a little nod to the tradition.
Yeah.
But then the underlayers are making it dirty and weird and
definitely sub-harmonizing it to suggest that there's a bit more of a twisted nature to this character. But I mean, the real enjoyment is just those first few bars of writing a piece of music for this character. And you imagine this isn't just representing this character, but this is what I believe this character would be dancing to in a rave. That's kind of where I was at when I was thinking, this is it. This is what she's going to be dancing to. I can imagine how frenetic a dance is going to be. Let's make that sax go with that dance.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool. And it's an interesting and frustrating aspect of hearing a score without seeing the film, because you listen to it and you read.
We'll send it to you. Okay?
Good. I wasn't sure if you got the hint yet or not. But like you listen to kind of the narrative flow, and depending on how the tracks are titled, like you could get an idea for what's going on. So like I know exactly what kind of like motif you're talking about just because of how it shows up and what it's titled. So yeah, so that's really cool. And I do appreciate kind of the subtlety that's brought to representing a character, because I think for a lot of people, your idea of a theme for a character is like a full-fledged melody that goes on for 15 or 30 seconds before it repeats or gets changed. And having a sonic, just a palette, or a few notes to represent someone, I think it's a, I don't know, in some ways a more interesting approach. It's, at the very least, it's not as kind of heavy-handed or overt. That there's a little more subtlety there going on.
It's a new approach for us. I can't think that we've done it on previous films, like being so different with the palettes for each character. I think when we were doing, Ask for Jane was definitely more traditional in that, it was like a late 60s period drama thing, almost like a late 60s period heist.
Set in Chicago as well.
Set in Chicago, yeah. But that was more traditional with the, same sound palette, more or less, switching between jazz-ish, so kind of film noir jazz and blues invasion. Yes, like spy noir, spy jazz.
It was like a Harry Palmer kind of spy sound going on in the late 60s.
But then the more British invasion blues folk, that kind of.
That's right.
But there was still crossover, and that was definitely much more sort of a theme for the heist, a theme for this character's love relationship affair thing. It was much more traditional in that sense.
Yeah.
So this has definitely been a departure. And what's been so beautiful about the project is the freedom that Carlos, the director, gave us. Carlos and Evo, the producer. You know, they really trust us. We worked with them quite a few times on a number of shorts, but this is the first feature. And yeah, they really sort of said, go big or go home, and then gave us free reign, really, which was amazing. It's such a privilege because it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, I mean, allowing us freedom is a misnomer to suggest that we can do whatever we want. You already heard that Daisy she is quite a control freak, so there is an element of confinements that we allow ourselves to sit within. Otherwise, we will go insane if we don't have that self-regulatory nature by which we can produce what we can do. They're laid back as far as producers and directors are concerned. They have this, you know, fetishistic enjoyment of being able to watch their own film that they haven't seen for ages as a new film with music. Because
it's a new experience.
It's a new experience for them. I just want to watch it all in total. I'm not saying this is a good way to go. There's a lot of directors who'll be thinking to themselves, "Oh my God, I can do that. I want to hit each and every cue as it's written,"
which is also fine.
That's absolutely fine. It's just these guys. I don't know. There's a different thing about them that I'd love to see what they can do with a few million.
Well, you know, if anyone's listening or watching that has a few million to spare, there you go. But that's got to be so nice because, you know, obviously I don't know how often this comes up, but you know, I think you hear more and more, even from some, you know, some quite big directors about temp music and how it's very limiting towards what they're able to do and really restrains kind of you know, their approach. I remember you know, I saw a roundtable where I think it was Danny Elfman is like, just, you know, I wouldn't say he's mad about it, but he's clearly upset about how that's come in. So that's got to be really nice for you to you know, not have that restraint on top of all the other kind of freedom and leeway you're given.
I mean, we did temp a film, but we just deleted that version immediately. We're not against temp music, by the way. I don't think that it's fair to say that. But there's some films that we've actually worked on where the temp has been really useful to be there, especially with time constraints as well.
I was going to say it depends why the temp is there. If it's an incredibly tight turnaround, I don't really know how you do it without temp unless you have a totally symbiotic relationship with the director or whoever the team is. If you've got a tight turnaround and you need to hit the beats that they want, then you need to hit the beats that they want, and that's kind of one of the best ways of portraying that, especially if the communication's not easy. You know, if there are more people involved, or you're maybe far away, if you can't be in the same room. I know none of us can be in the same room, but you know, in previous years, if you can't be in the same room, and I think that's I think the real issue comes when you can't get to a place where you both understand why that temp was chosen. I think that's the key. If you can have the conversation and it's really clear what the point of that is. So is it that it was the right pace? Is it that it hit a particular beat at a particular time and was kind of fuzzy around the edges, but that one beat, that's what the director wants? Whatever the reason, that our job is to replicate that, not to replicate the temp.
Yeah,
I'm sure there are projects where you are told to replicate the temp. We, thank goodness, have not had to do that yet, or been asked to do that yet. But yeah, again, like everything, communication, as long as you're clear what it's telling you.
We work in an industry which is a show don't tell industry, and for the most part, directors get to do that showing. But when it comes to the aspect of being able to actually tell the person who's writing the music what kind of thing they're looking for, it becomes very hard, especially if they don't speak a musical language. Sometimes it's worse when they do speak a musical language. It's just a lot quicker to kind of show them what they're thinking musically by using an example, and that's absolutely fine. But I mean, about 20 minutes ago, I mentioned about the communication being key as to how people work in a team, and the fact is, I think the three of the films that we worked on this year alone have been key to communication between us and the directors, and just knowing from the outset, before they've even started rolling any film, that this is the story that they want to tell, and this is kind of how our heads are already working with that, so we can go back and forth with them. But the fact of the matter is, like, the higher up you go, I suppose, the less of an opportunity you get to do that, the less opportunity that you have for all of that time that you can surround yourself with. So, you know, I think once we get there, we can report back to you, Nick, and let you know how we're feeling about temp music then. But for, you know, as it stands at the moment, you know, we've got a healthy relationship with it, but at the moment, we get to have that time with a director where we can communicate ideas with them and communicate sketches and tones and try new stuff out. And it's probably one of the good things about being at this level. You know, it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, working with indie directors, you do get a lot more time to just talk and learn about everything that's not on the screen. That's
right. Even if those talks are just like geeking out about other people's films and not even talking about the way you're going to work. So we did that. Like Adam Batchelor, the director of Story, he would come over and we would just talk about other people's films the whole time and talk about what we loved watching and growing up together. When Perry from Home by 8:30 comes over, he's really cool about wanting to just talk about films that he's gone to see, that he's looking forward to seeing. And then bye, got this film. Bye. You know, it's like it's really cool. It's, you know, so that's the kind of thing that we really appreciate right now. I really love it.
See, I'm gonna say it's really annoying that's the last thing that you've said, because I love doing that too, just going on and on about films, just ignoring whatever the purpose of a meeting or call is supposed to be. And I'd love to do that right now. And I hate to cut this short because I think we could have kept talking for another few hours. But it's already been almost an hour 15. And yeah. And so unfortunately, I am actually the one for the first time that has to cut this short. But, you know, like I said at the very beginning, I am so happy that the two of you came to talk with me, and I think this was a really nice chat. Like I said, if the real world didn't exist, we could have gone on for another 2 hours talking about film and film music and who knows whatever else might come up.
If we went on any longer, Daisy would be on Skyscanner looking up flights to Chicago.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. So we'll schedule this re-chat for when we're in Chicago, when we're allowed to get on the plane. Don't worry, we'll finish it.
All right, good. And luckily, my mic works on both sides, so that'll cover us entirely.
That's cool.
Amazing.
That's cool.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been such a joy chatting to you. It's it's been really lovely.
Yeah, thank you very much for looking after us, Nick. It's been really cool.
Oh yeah, of course. Don't even thank me. You two are the ones doing me the favor. So I don't know. I've said it 5 times already, but thanks again for coming on. I'll follow up with the two of you about timing and all that. Unfortunately, life has completely capsized all my plans for this, so I'm still scrambling to figure out exactly what I'm doing, as I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, everything's kind of who knows what's going to happen, what it's going to be like in a week's time. That's why our drinking habits have got so much worse. And Daisy's about to go and make me an old-fashioned, right?
Am I? Oh, apparently I've got my orders.
Yeah, that's definitely what I fancy right now.
All right. Well, thanks again. The two of you have a good night, and I'll be talking to you soon.